It's mad bright.
Hello.
It's safe to say that of all the television series that are so just integrated into the American culture, the Twilight Zone is near the top, if not the top for many people. I don't know a single person who has never seen at least one episode or heard of it. So one of the things I wanted to open up with was what were each of your relationships with this show before coming on board to make an episode?
Well, I used to watch it with my parents, and as a kid, and I feel like it was always so exciting when it was coming on, and it was one of those kind of thriller type edge of your seat experiences, but it always left you with a moral question. And even as a kid, I would be like, wow, it would be something that you would think about and you would ponder. And I feel like that was the first of its kind. I love the fact that it kind of put a mirror up to human nature and society. And so I was a fan back then, and was so excited to be a part this time.
Twilight Zone and I met twice in my childhood. The first time was in Guyana, where I'm from, in the Caribbean. And so if you're Guyanese and you grew up in the 70s and 80s, we didn't have like TV, so people would send VHS tapes back, like just full of stuff to watch. So all my classic 70s stuff is like from a VHS tape at my grandparents' house. And one of those tapes had a few episodes of The Twilight Zone. And I must have been 7 or 8, I can't remember, but I was hooked, right? And fast forward to immigrating to New York.
Fast forward.
The sequel.
Exactly.
Moved to New York in the 80s, like a lot of West Indians, and then I become part of the annual WPIX Channel 11 Sci-Fi Twilight Zone Marathon. Which a lot of us grew up on. So those are my big touchstones as a kid. But I was always into genre storytelling, always into sci-fi and speculative storytelling, and also always into stories that had a moral purpose, because I think storytelling has a purpose. And the Twilight Zone embodied that for me as a kid.
So one of the things, and of course this episode, when people are talking about this particular season, this episode is, I almost want to say everyone's told me that it's the best one, and I'm not just saying that since you're here. I think it is. But it just covers so much ground, but it's this interesting episode that the story speaks to where we are now, and yet is a tribute to so many elements of the past couple of incarnations of the Twilight Zone. I actually kind of had to look up a few things and see the little Easter eggs within the episode.
Right.
I don't even know them. What are they?
Well, one of them, as soon as you look, there is the busy bee that was in a previous episode. There's an entire episode in the first series about a stopwatch that could stop time. The next thing you see is a clock. I'm not going to totally nerd out, but but suffice it to say, I mean, this is something that I think the Twilight Zone does really well, is just take these what ifs, and of course time travel is one of the great instruments in genre to explore what ifs. But the interesting thing about this is that it takes time travel and puts it in a different kind of framework for today. And you were mentioning that when you first came to the project, Selwyn, that Jordan said, we have these ideas and we're doing this.
Stop me if I run on too long, because I can talk about this forever. But the experience of writing a show for this season was Jordan knew from the gate that there were big topics that he wanted to tackle. And a lot of times as a writer, you can build a story like you've got an idea about this character, about this thing, sort of bottom up. It's more challenging to say, here's this huge thing that we want to tackle. It's like, well, how do I fashion a story and some characters that, that speak to it? So we wrestled with it as a writer's room for a couple of weeks. And one day I said, because I was avoiding doing this, but I knew I had to. I said, I'm going to go on YouTube, I'm going to watch every videotaped encounter of a cop and a black person that went bad. And I knew I had to write this episode, and I was like, let me just go and do it. And it took me about 2 days, and I literally got the idea of the show from that. I was like, wow, this is the clock rewinding in time, and nothing freaking changes, and it's happening again and again and again and again. That's like, that's the show. Well, that's the episode. Pitched it to Jordan. He loved it, and then we got into the actual work of it. But I knew that if we could write something that could empathetically put you in the POV of, you know, the woman that's next to Philandro Castile, Sandra Bland. I mean, just any one of these mothers and the family left behind, that we would have done something. So the idea of time rewinding actually did not come from sci-fi trope. It came from the reality of what's happening. So.
And when I read it, I was on the edge of my seat. I cried. I was. I immediately called my agent, and I'm notoriously slow deciding on things. And he was like, "Are you sure?" I said, "Please sign me up." I just think you are such a special, phenomenal writer.
Thank you.
Which, you know, we know in this. Yes. We know in this day and age how rare that is. At least I do. And one of the things that I think is so amazing is that you wrote from a female perspective. And for me as an actor, it was so exciting to step outside of her nightmare and go on this emotional journey. So thank you. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Sanaa, and I'm going to send all this love back at her. This was both a challenging script to write, but also an easy script in some ways, because I felt like I was just a vessel, you know, in some ways. The story had to tell itself. You know, and then as a writer, you know, you're done, you go and you're in your other projects. And I was really busy, and they were shooting episodes. I was like, okay, I can spend the first couple of days on set. So I came to see the shoot. And as soon as it was go and action, and this woman started acting, it blew me away. It blew everyone away. I'm not sure how many people know how television works. Television works in this thing they call block shooting, right? So if we're going to shoot a bunch of scenes in this room, we're going to shoot them all out, even if they happen in different parts of the show. So Sanaa, so just think of the diner, for instance. Every emotion her character went through in that diner, she had to do in one half day or whatever it was, like back to back. So she comes back, her son just died. She's happy, she's going to reason with the cop. I mean, it was astonishing to watch. Like, it was like instant like emotion. I'm not capable of even.
I'm not capable of writing a script like you, so you know.
So anyway, we were meant to team up.
Yes,
you know?
yes.
Well, this actually segues into my next question, which is to you, Sanaa. I think that one of the things that when I rewatched a number of Twilight Zone episodes, particularly ones where the main protagonists were women, there's this version, and granted, it's a different time, there are different acting styles, but there's a version of anxiety that I feel that the actors had to portray that were more in line with having a wide frame. It was much more broad, I felt. And it must have been interesting to do it in this day and age where there's that real close-up and like some of the moments that are just these tight shots on your face and just watching you vibrate with that fear. Must have been interesting to kind of, again, in the block shots, do over and over again and make it feel so new and resonant every single time.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta be honest, like this is the kind of role that I live for and pray for and feel very prepared for. I've come from the theater, so it's like you have to, you know, really act and do it live and do it over and over again and find new colors all the time. And I've been very challenged and very blessed to play some of the greatest roles, you know, from Shakespeare to, you know, Chekhov to new playwrights on stage. And so to have something that's filmed on TV or in movies that even comes up to that level of challenge is great. So for me, it was like I was a kid in a candy store, even though she was, you know, she wasn't.
She was going
right?
through
I
it.
was.
You're like, I'm having fun though.
Exactly, I'm having fun, so I'll take some more. Right, exactly. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
And we had a great director, Gerard McMurray,
Gerard.
and
Yep.
DP. What was his name?
German guy. Oh my God.
Because we had to shoot this fast. We shot this in like 3 weeks, and so, you know, you're moving fast. And I felt like just filmically, also, it was just so sweeping and cinematic.
They helped tell the story.
Yeah.
You know? So it was the crew did a great job. Director, everybody did a great job in it.
And I love, by the way, the transition of this from color to black and white, because it takes it to a completely different level. My colleague Matt Zoller-Seitz, I don't know if he's in the audience. Oh, there you are. Hello. But he did a panel the other night with Sam Ismail, and they talked about the paranoid thriller. And maybe it is because the classic Twilight Zone is so part of the cultural consciousness, but there's something about transitioning it into that format, that simple aesthetic change kind of heightens it.
Yeah.
So, and I know you took a peek, so.
Yeah, it's hard for me I had to leave. I can't, it's hard just watching yourself. I mean, I guess the way that I describe it to people is, how do you like hearing your voice played back on recorder? Like, times like 10 million, right? And so generally with me, I'm very proud of this, but I've watched it once and I don't need to watch it again. Like, that's just me. But yeah.
I think that's, I get it. Yeah,
You get
I
it.
absolutely get it.
Right.
For sure. So let's talk about time travel.
Sure.
Skipping ahead. One of the things that we were talking about a little bit were the rules of time travel. And so how people can really nerd out on that. And by the way, in terms of Twilight Zone, like that's one of those shows where there are people like me who watch it and enjoy it and know a few titles. And they're super, the time-space continuum is a problem. So that must have been really interesting for you to write this.
It was a pain in the ass.
I bet, yeah.
It's the best way to think about it is the episode, the way you experience it to some extent is the tip of a very big iceberg, right? Because all the structure and the mythology about how time works is sort of below the surface. And before we got to that tip of the iceberg, we had to go through, when Jordan's like, all right, so what are the rules of the world, right? Like we have to build this thing. I'm a time travel nerd to an extent. Luckily, there was a woman in the writers' room named Heather Campbell, Heather Campbell's a genius, oh my God. Heather wrote the Space Shuttle episode with Glenn Morgan. But Heather is like, oh, you want to talk time travel? Like, this theory and that theory and sort of this and that. So we spent like 2 days just like completely like bored. Like the room looked like a NASA room when we were finished, right? Like all these sort of like, well, if this loops here and this happens, and then we were like, okay, well, what if you can, I won't give it all away, but the stuff we came up with is like, well, what if you can rewind, and if I rewind it and I pull you into the vortex of the rewind, I pause and then I jump into your life. And then, I mean, there's so many versions of this episode where like the thing, but eventually you get to the point you do as a writer, which is what is the cleanest, simplest, most elegant execution, of a thing. And we got there on this. We spent some time looking back at how the Twilight Zone had dealt with time travel. But we were much more looking at just sort of the contemporary, landscape. Whether it was Edit Tomorrow, obviously Groundhog Day is is a constant reference. But I think the real departure point for us, and this is what's true about the Twilight Zone in general, it is marrying what we're doing thematically and emotionally with genre tools, right? So it's not just about the time travel, right? It's the fact that ultimately the magic is fruitless, right? Ultimately, you cannot get away from the weight of what the episode is trying to talk about thematically, right? There's no easy fixes. There's no like, I'm gonna go back and move the bottle over this way, and then things change. Things don't change. You have a little bit more time to figure out the fact that things are not changing, and how you can attack the problem, on an angle. That's a short answer.
That's a great answer. And then to what he was talking about, I wanted to talk to you because you mentioned Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Matt and I actually discussed earlier was the whole idea of time loops are very popular. But one of the things when we were having our discussion was that we pointed out that in general, for cinema, the time loop is like, oh, I get to, like, there's Happy Death Day, where it's like, how can I stop dying? Russian Doll.
Yeah.
But we also have time loops like Groundhog Day being the great example of, like, the time loop is used as, in order for me to get out of the time loop, the Bill Murray's character, it's a means of self-improvement. Like, basically, by the end, he's like, I'm a Renaissance man who can play piano and sculpt ice, and like that kind of thing.
Right.
Whereas with your character, the time loop becomes survival.
It's survival, and one of the things that I thought was so extra beautiful about this was the fact that she had to go back and make peace with her past, and she had to ask for help. which for Black women,
Oh yeah.
My God.
in this, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we don't ask for help. So, but we need to ask for help. And so, I mean, that's a generalization, you know, and
But it's true.
But it's true.
Yeah.
And so, I thought that was beautiful, and she had to have kind of like go back to her community to rise out of this nightmare.
Yeah,
This guy.
Nina is not exactly like her, but a lot of the character of Nina comes from my mom, you know, who, you know, sort of came to this country with 2 boys and, you know, was again sort of the, yes, generalizing, but the prototypical sort of like strong Black mother, right? And did everything and carried jugs of water on her metaphorical, you know, shoulders, you know. But there's certain aspects of the past and her past that, if you're that sort of like forward-tracking figure, it's easier in some way to be like, well, that was, you know, we don't got time for that. You know, we got to sort of, you know, keep going. So there's a little bit of that DNA in there. You know, I think as a writer, you're forming this pastiche of the universe around you, right? And pieces of the character come from here and there and there and so on and so forth. There's even, although the genders are flipped, there's even a lot of myself and my teenage daughter's relationship in Sanaa's and Damson's, you know, when I wrote it. So you pull from what drives and inspires you.
I want to talk about the ambiguous ending. I think it's so important.
Sure, yeah.
And I love the fact that it's interesting to hear people's interpretations of it. I've straight up had to correct people and say, like, no, it doesn't end like that. He doesn't go out and get shot. That doesn't happen.
Right.
And I have to go back and show them.
Right,
but
right,
it's
right.
kind of ending that places a seed. It's almost like it waters a seed that's already in
Yeah.
your head about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, Jordan did his own ending with Get Out that was
Yeah.
very definitive.
Yeah.
But what I was thinking about this one, it goes right in the middle. There's
Yeah.
no, like, you have to basically, it's a strange kind of
Yeah.
either hopeful or sad, choose your own adventure
It's a choose
with
your
that
own
last
adventure.
shot.
Yeah.
So when did you decide to come
Decide to do that?
Yeah.
After I'd written about 10 versions of this, we're like, Nina kills Lasky, or it's like some of it was like therapeutic, you know, like some of it was like, I'm gonna get that, you know what I mean? Like, so you kind of got to just write your way to clarity. Sometimes you're like, okay, all right, we got rid of all that. And Jordan came to the room one day, and, you know, it's like, okay, you know, because the way we were, I mean, we kind of do our thing, and then Jordan would pop in and be like, what you got? You know, and we say, oh, we got this. So I'm pitching. We get to the ending, and he's like, yeah, that's dope. He said, but what if X, Y, Z? We knew we wanted to do, so I was trying to do a version of Inception that worked for this, you know, because I'm a huge Nolan fan, and that movie, you know, and it was just randomly one day like, what am I trying to do here? So I knew sort of like structurally what I wanted to do. Jordan helped me with the how, you know, so I was like, I want to go for this ambiguity thing, you know, I want to, you know, communicate the fact that no, this thing isn't fucking solved, right? You know what I mean? Like, Nina and, you know, and her son and her family, they've managed to navigate past it's a minotaur in a maze, right? And they've managed to navigate their way through. But if they're a minotaur in a maze in the context of where they are on the show, society at large is a huge minotaur's maze with several minotaurs in it, right? So she got her way out of this one. It's like, fuck, the entirety of our society is a minotaur's maze, right? So for me, it was like, how do
What's
I
a Minotaur's mane?
it's that old Greek thing that the
Yes.
bull man and
There was yarn involved. It was something else.
okay.
Yeah. I'm gonna show you the version of the script that's real Minotaur man.
Oh, okay.
So you don't want to do that. But Jordan said, why don't we have him walk out of the house and you hear the sound of the cop car?
It just gives me chills even just hearing
That's it.
everything.
You know, and I was like, and then I wrote it, I was like, shit, this is terrifying, you know, because it also felt really personal. Like literally, maybe 3 weeks before I handed that script in, I was in Santa Monica, California, leaving some kind of dinner meeting, and was waiting for an Uber. And just very casually, a patrol car was going by, and the guy just slowed down. He just said, "Everything all right?" And I was like, man, I'm 40, whatever years old. I'm a successful screenwriter. And this motherfucker wants to know about, like it just is like, you just can't get away from it,
Yeah.
And I want to be able to communicate some of that in the ending. So, yeah, Jordan helped us do it. And the touch that they added, the director
The
did that on
light.
set. I didn't write that. But
Yeah, that was.
when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, that's genius. But
Yeah.
her face and I mean, I did the whole thing with her expressions in the script, but adding the light on it was
No,
just
those
like,
were mine.
Those were She owns all of that, yeah. It was, yeah. So hopefully, it hit people the way we intended.
How did it strike you when you first read it?
I mean, it terrifies me now. I'm so like, I'm so empathic all the time, and I just right now my stomach is
tight,
like
right?
tight just from thinking about it. So yeah. And it's funny because this theme in my work has been happening. I did Shots Fired where I played a cop, but the whole, the whole series was about this subject, and I've had a couple of, it was when we were shooting that, it was right around the time that Sandra Bland was killed, and there was like a record number of murders. And now, even when I'm in LA, in my car on the freeway, and I see a cop, my stomach, I get scared.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
It's a visceral reaction now, so.
All the time.
The choice to have Lasky be so calm is just unnerving. And you were talking about the fact that, but the actor's a really nice guy.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah, it's just, she can tell you. So
it's so funny because
we both
we
love
did
Glenn. You talk about
Shakespeare.
Glenn first.
Yeah, Glenn Fleshler plays Lasky, and he's doing so many things. He's going to be in the new.
He's so dope.
What's the one with Joaquin Phoenix? The Joker.
The Joker, yeah.
Movie with Joaquin
sort of Joker.
Phoenix. Yeah, he was on that show. What's that show that he's on where he plays
Boardwalk,
Russian?
man. Oh,
Billions.
Yeah.
Billions, yeah.
Yeah.
I love him from Boardwalk. Remix.
Barry. He's on Barry. He plays. I don't know if you guys.
He's on Barry, yeah.
Barry, yeah.
Barry
Anyway, he's a
Field.
great actor. We did Shakespeare in the Park together like 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Measure for Measure. So it was great because we're like, we go way back, and it's like
Yeah.
he couldn't be more he's so harmless. So it was nice. It was nice to have that in between
dope.
takes.
He's dope. And I didn't really talk to him in between. Like I was on set such a short time, and I'd written this character, and I was like, I had all this stuff in my head. I was like, Jaws, right? He's like Jaws, and he just keeps coming, right? There's all these.
And slowly, there's no running. He's
Yeah.
he's just there. He's
like I'm
always
writing,
there.
because you kind of got to psych yourself up as you're writing, like, who is this character? And when we did different versions, I did a version where he was like, super, like way more emotional about it, and one way, but that version sort of fit right. And then I meet Glenn on set, and I only really see him during the takes. I don't see him in between. I'm like, God damn, this dude is scary as hell. Like, he really is this guy. And a few weeks later, we're at the premiere party, and I'm like, oh shit, he's like he is the sweetest, nicest.
Yeah.
And I literally go over to him. I was with my girlfriend there. She could testify to this, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I was like, I feel like I have like permanently caused you to people look at you sideways now. I'm like,
funny.
my bad. But he's like oh my God, he's like so chill and so good. But he's awesome. He did an amazing job. He's an amazing job. And the three of them together, they're just, I mean, I feel like
Damson,
my episode had the best actors, just selfishly speaking. But I think it really is true.
Damson was extraordinary too.
And he's like English. He does not have an American accent. He is English all the way, and anyway, he's amazing. I was really blown away.
Did it trip you
I'm a
out when he,
little
like,
young
flips?
to play his mother. But, I was like, him? That's my son. But, he's a great actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Selwyn, you have a funny story. So if you didn't recognize Damson from another show, he's the star of Snowfall.
Yeah.
And you have to tell that story about how he got his.
Do you guys know how Damson got his accent? I mean, he talked about it, I think, on Kimmel. Just want to know how many people know. Okay, you don't know. So Damson is in LA prepping to do Snowfall, and the studio sends Dub C to pick him up. Dub C is a very gangster, like LA rapper, like West Coast Connection, crip walk in, like the whole thing. So Damson's telling me the story. So he picks him up, and Damson was like, okay, like, where are we going? Like, what are we doing? And Dub just took him, like, to the jungle. These are all, like, really tough LA neighborhoods, like up in Watts, like really had him sort of like in LA. And like 2 weeks later, he sounds like a native.
Yeah, it's so true.
He actually sounds so LA because I didn't write you guys as being from it. Like, actually.
Yes.
And I was like, wait a minute, Dorian's from LA now? It's like,
yeah.
Like his LA accent is so like LA now.
It was like no place, right?
Yeah,
in every
yeah,
place.
it was no place in every place.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, he's from LA. That's interesting. But he is an
so
amazing
good.
actor.
He's an actor's actor.
He's really good. He's really good.
Well, I'm sure some of you have some questions. Oh, look at that. Yes, some of you do have some questions. So we're going to start in the back there. We have a mic coming to you. So pass it down.
One thing that really got me in the climax is how when Lasky is like driven away, like all the other cops behind him are kind of like looking at him or like at each other. Like, what were you trying to like convey with that? Like, were they like racist too, or were they like also like a lesser shade of gray?
Yeah. Well, I will. I'll speak for Gerard. I think part of that is the director's choice, but the version in the script. One thing that was important that for me was all those cops can't be on the same emotional beat, right? They can't be on the same part of the meter, because even if the machine in its totality is, in my mind, serving the dark side of the force, there's variations on the spectrum,
Yeah.
of it. So if we had created a moment where all the cops were like, we're gonna, there had to be some degree of emotional push and pull in that moment. And it made sense that it's the one cop who tells Lasky, you know what, like, you've now gone over as well after Sanaa gives him the guillotine line, and he's like, come on, man, let's get out of here.
Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful moment too.
A her moment?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
whole poetry of that with everything and coming back. It makes sense when you were saying that you watched
Yeah.
all those videos.
Yeah, no, she killed it.
Yes.
She killed it. It didn't sound that good on the page.
Yes. Yes, ma'am, all the way over there. Just getting her steps in.
Now you need two mics, huh?
Who is it? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just making it super easy for her. Yeah.
Hi. I really enjoyed the moment, or enjoyed the progression of seeing that motherly moment of her telling him not to squeeze the ketchup on his shirt at the beginning of it, and then seeing that go back to the replaying moment of him getting shot and seeing that be undone and then the ketchup be undone, and just the progression of kind of like that black motherhood, that instinct. How were you able to develop, and how did your experience contribute to developing that speaking to like the talk, or like, what do you do when cops are around? Like that idea of like the time continuum, but also like inevitable reality, and how that interacts with motherhood and black motherhood especially.
I think that's a you, no?
Oh, well, for me, I mean, she is every mother. She is every mother who loves their children, right? That's why I feel like this story is so universal, but specifically told through a black mother. And specifically in this country, and for 400, more than 400 years, we have been dealing with, the murder and the separation of our children. And that is just, heartbreaking for me, and I can easily tap into that. And I think it's a beautiful, the way that he put it into this like thriller type unfolding was perfect to get the point across for everybody. I mean, I think everybody can identify with this.
Yeah, and just as I guess from the writing side, the point you made about, a thing happens in an episode that foreshadows a thing that happens later, or it's the same thing that happens later. Things are moving around the river, around these like stationary points, but every time Sanaa goes by one of these points, something in her character, Nina. Thank you. Every every time Nina goes through one of these points, Nina's changing, right? So it's sort of like, what is the dialectic between what anchors us and what's stable, and a character and a human being that's changing. So that's part of what time travel lets you do in drama. Yes.
That's really.
How about right here? Hello.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
I just wanted to comment on the parallel to the Underground Railroad
Yeah.
as they were going through the back alleys. Was that something that was overt when you were writing, and also when you were shooting it, what was that like, paralleling that in the modern day?
It was definitely intentional. There are always things that evolve, grow, change from a shooting script to to when you go into production. But that was intentional from day one. That their journey would evoke that. Would just give you. So how subtextual it would be versus how overt it would be. Even I wasn't sure, in terms of how the director would interpret it. But it was always the dramatic, intention. I thought it was I thought it was a touch that made sense, and it's one of the reasons also why I loved. We got to give Steve props too.
Yeah, Steve Harris.
The actor who plays her brother. I love that character. I could write a whole episode just on him as well. But this guy who's in a neighborhood like so many neighborhoods that we live in right now, that's changing at such a rapid pace. But he is like, I'm going to make my stand in the present, which means holding on to our past. Yeah. So he let us take the narrative in that direction.
I loved your scenes together too.
Yeah.
They were so good
Steve,
together.
We go way
yeah.
back.
Yeah, he's a great actor.
Yeah.
He's so dope.
For sure. Okay, we're gonna go over here. Yes.
Thank you. Great job, both of you. Sanaa, love the writing, amazing.
Thank you.
So my question is, the black and white, obviously the symbolism is amazing, but did you come up with it being in black and white? How did that whole, shooting it in black and white come about? It was beautiful,
This
I loved
was
it.
a special thing that CBS is doing.
Okay.
They're all in color.
They're, right.
And so they're re-releasing them all in black and white.
Oh, all of them are now
All
gonna
of
be-
them. Yeah, so
I
it's
thought
like a
this was
special-
a specific choice. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It works well with ours. So
It does, it really does.
If you want to give us credit, we'll take it.
I will.
We'll take it. We'll take it.
I've got eyeline right back there, so we're gonna go on back and then we'll come around.
Hi, Daddy.
Hi, man.
Oh my goodness.
My question
I can't
is
see.
for Miss Lathan, actually.
I'm
So,
chopped liver.
so just in preparation for this role, it is a huge emotional burden. And the way you portray your character, I think it resonates with everyone who watches it so personally. So I guess my question to you is, how do you, what's your process going into a character like that? How do you get into that headspace, that mind space, to
articulate.
execute and
Yeah, she's
portray that kind of emotion?
All right.
Yeah.
That was not a plant, by the way.
Exactly.
Not at all.
Oh God. Just like, when you're doing it for this many years, I have a toolbox. And, I went to drama school, I've had different types of acting classes, I've done theater. I really believe that, when you're an artist, that you have to continue, have your study, and have your base. But always, even once you're professional, continue to push yourself, continue to get outside people to help you. So there are many times in my life that I have worked with acting coaches. I did not with this one, but I just have a toolbox that every character that I come to demands different tools. And for me to get into that, that's like an acting workshop. We could do that another time. But it's really about, ultimately, it's about the truth. It's about connecting. We all are human and we all have all of these emotions within us. And it's about compassion and empathy and connecting with that character and wanting to serve the character and serve the story. and I use the different tools that I have. I don't know if that was.
No, that's, yeah, there you go. Sure. All right, right here. Yes, sir. He's like, me?
Hi there. My name is Markel. I was just curious of, there was a part towards the end where your character is with, which is your granddaughter, and she has this camera that's so important, and she drops it. And I was just wondering if there was like symbolism there about the youth making sure that they sort of remember what's happened before.
That's interesting.
And whether or not like it was intentional. Like she didn't seem like the little girl dropped it on purpose, but it's like she's just trying to move on and live her life. And also just to see what your thought is on like the importance of the youth remembering, or if it's really their responsibility.
Well, this is a great question for you, but just my feeling on that, I think it's great and it's so beautiful because, you know, yes, we can never forget our past, right? But in order to move forward, you kind of
Can't be anxious
get
about
present.
it.
You got to get present.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, in my opinion, it's kind of like a metaphor for, okay, Grandma, come on up to the present, you know, Grandma.
That's Grandma. So I will just say, while we didn't write, you know, specifically that the granddaughter had that sort of dramatic intention. One of the things about scene work and scene writing in general, if you do it okay enough, is the scene itself has a driving thematic and emotional and metaphoric purpose, you know, like every scene in the thing. So what you're describing, this idea of letting go into youth and all of this, that's sort of the governing principle of the scene, you know. And if it's well acted and well directed, it sort of filters through everything, you know. So that's the lens through which you're seeing all the actions anyway. So even if I didn't say in writing it, oh, this is the little girl means this metaphorically, that you know, like that's the engine of the whole thing. So it comes out.
I will say that there have been a couple of things that I read that they were actually like, why did he use this janky old camera? It's like, well,
We're going to use an iPhone.
right. Yeah, and of course part of that is homage because there's a whole and most unusual camera, but part of it is you can rewind those.
You can rewind.
And actually you can see it happen.
Yeah.
You know. But it's also just a little insider of the writer room stuff. One of the things that informs the whole series in terms of its attitude towards technology, right? Because one of the things that we had to talk about was how do we exist in a world, in a space where Black Mirror exists, right? So which gives us a very different relationship to technology. So we wanted to use technology in a way that evokes things like nostalgia and yesterday and the communion between yesterday and today, you know. So technology in its sort of like dystopian sense is not the narrative point of our show. So we just have it completely. So you would only see a classic 90s camcorder in the Twilight Zone. Right?
Exactly. Yes, ma'am. Right here. Yes, I'm looking at you.
Hi there. Hi there. I just want to say that I really, really like the ending because it shows us that sometimes you really can't escape. Like he didn't escape. In my belief, he didn't really escape death. It wasn't a mythical story. It was more sci-fi. But I want to talk a little bit about the scene with all the cops and at the school and the relationship between the cops and then the students and everybody gathering. How did you write that to make it so that it wasn't cheesy or a PSA kind of thing, and it fed through into the narrative?
That's a good example of why TV is a collaborative medium. I mean, I can only take a quarter of that credit because they've got to do it right. Gerard has to shoot it right. It starts with the intention that we have, you know, in the script, and I think it works because if you've done your job enough as a writer, you know, the script is going like this, right? Like the drama is rise and fall, 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 and then you get to a point where things crest. So Am I getting too screenwriter nerdy? I'm not sure. Okay. So if this thing here at the end isn't working, it just means that this path to get to it, that's sort of where, you know, the fault lies. And really, we just wanted to create this environment where, like, or a scene where it's like, fuck, like, you as the audience, like, I've had enough, right? She is a character. She has had enough, you know what I mean? Like, fuck this shit, you know what I mean? And like that's really, sometimes I write scenes and I put like the metaphor of the scene on, I'm not sure if I did this, but I think that scene was like just the fuck this shit scene. Right? You know, and it's that moment, it's like, can we get a break, right? And incorporating the crowd there, it's why she uses the word witness, right? Because there's a particular power in, I think, did I go?
Yeah, you went. We all went. Oh, no, I didn't.
Okay. Check. I think I went. I'll just talk about it.
Yeah, it's a small theater.
Check. Okay. There's a particular power in witness, in the silence of witnessing, right? To me, that's what the word conveys. So the idea that we'd have all these kids who are Dorian's contemporaries, like they are the next generation. They're who we are fighting. You know, kids like my daughter who we're fighting to create this better world. Like they're all just standing there, like, yeah, okay. I curse too much, motherfucker. Like, we see you. You know what I mean? And it's really using the latent power. Like, think of that scene and that moment as the little spark of electricity that pushes them out of, like, their immediate maze, right? So gets them out of it. But we're still in the larger construct of American society. So that's, I guess, how we thought of that scene. At least I did.
I could continue this forever, but unfortunately, we're getting the time's up.
Okay.
But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Selwyn Seyfu Hinds, Sanaa Lathan.
Thank you.
Thank you.